Long gone. Merrick stood by his one-man shuttle and looked out at the desolate plain before him. The sun was high in the sky and the air was relatively clear, except for a low layer of dust from the deserts to the west that were carried by the endless winds. But it was cold. It was midsummer, but there were still traces of snow on the ground. How do you fix total devastation, he thought. How can you fix what's been broken beyond repair? Standing west of where the city of Chicago had once stood, he wondered for the 1,000th time what had happened. The land around him stretched to the horizon, almost completely flat. The terrain, for as far as he could see, was featureless. No trees remained. Not even ruins of what had once been here were visible, though he had confirmed that if you dug down more than a few inches, you would uncover the remains of buildings and houses that had once been there. There was no life to be seen. Not even grass or weeds were visible. The few tests he had performed confirmed that only anaerobic bacteria had survived. The lack of visible life was undoubtedly due to the nearly complete absence of oxygen. After whatever catastrophe had happened here, the Earth's ecosystem had collapsed. The oceans had been poisoned and all the plankton died. With that loss, oxygen levels in the atmosphere dropped precipitously, and all life on the planet had died. He hadn't needed to wear a full environmental suit. The air pressure and temperature were close enough to normal that he only needed to wear an oxygen mask to venture out of his tiny ship. His mind raced as he catalogued the different things that might have happened here and caused this devastation. This was the 5th site he had visited. His other stops had been to large cities, and at those sites he could at least see the skeletal remains of tall skyscrapers and city buildings, though most were simply piles of twisted, rusted metal and crumbled stone. Merrick had stopped at this place merely because it had been where he had grown up and called home far too many centuries ago, though to him only a few decades had passed. Without more sophisticated equipment, he couldn't accurately determine when the catastrophe had occurred. The lack of radiation indicated that the cause had not been nuclear war. The sun seemed normal, so an intense and prolonged solar incident seemed unlikely. The near-total destruction of structures suggested that the event had not simply been biological in nature, though that might have occurred as well. From his ship up in orbit, he had noted a crater in eastern Europe, indicating a large impact of some sort on the planet's surface, but it was not big enough to explain the total extinction event like what had occurred. The radio link in his helmet sounded with a scratchy burst of static. Merrick, can you hear me?" "Yes, Joan. I hear you loud and clear. Have you found anything from your view in orbit?" "Well, yes, sort of. You were right about that crater in the Russian steppes. It wasn't large enough to cause all the damage we've seen. I conducted a series of deep radio scans of the oceans for more than a dozen orbits, and I think I found at least 4 larger impact craters deep underwater in the oceans. That might explain what happened." "Where were those impact sites?" he asked. 2 were in the Pacific, at least 1 in the Atlantic, and another in the Indian Ocean. To be spread out that widely, they couldn't have all hit at the same time. The impacts must have been spread out over several days. That would make sense, thought Merrick. Ocean impacts released more energy than land strikes, and since the Earth was 75% water, meteors were more likely to land there. The resultant mile-high mega tsunamis would have destroyed everything near the oceans for perhaps hundreds of miles inland. With 80% of the world's population near the ocean coasts, most of the people on Earth would have died within the first few hours of impact. I wonder how much warning people had, he thought. I wonder if anyone managed to escape. Joan, how is it that with the technology that was available the last time we were here, they didn't destroy the asteroids before they hit? Actually, I think they might have tried, said Joan. There's a lot of debris up here in orbit. The Earth may actually develop rings in a few more centuries. Right now I'm guessing that a large planetoid approached Earth from outside the solar system. It looks like they may have hit it with some very large weapons. However, instead of diverting it, I think they just broke it into multiple pieces. They must have tried to blow up those pieces, but they only made matters worse. They didn't get them all, and the ones they did hit simply turned into thousands of smaller missiles. That doesn't make sense. There should have been plenty of time to deflect anything long before it hit. They had elaborate detection systems long before we had star travel. Well, countered Joan, perhaps it was very fast-moving and they didn't have time. Like I said, there's a hell of a lot of fragments up here. Be careful when you come back. I don't want you hitting anything your shields can't deflect. It's still odd. Something doesn't make sense, he replied. What about life up there in space or on any of the colonies? Surely some of the orbital habitats in orbit are intact. I would have thought that too, said Joan, but all of them are powered down and adrift. Most are in tatters, too, with thousands of meteors raining down from space and all the rock that was thrown up from the surface by the largest impacts. It would have been as if the orbital stations were sitting ducks that got hit by shotgun blasts from both directions. Still, some seem to be intact and may have been abandoned. I can't believe it either, she said. Some people would have stayed. They can't have all died or left. We just have to do more investigating. I agree, he said. I'm headed back now. I've seen all I want to. I'll bring back samples I've taken and... Wait, I forgot to ask, have you been able to determine more precisely when all this happened? My best guess, is that this occurred just over 2 centuries ago. The event corresponds to just a few years after we left for our trip to Deneb. The impacts probably kicked up enough dust into the atmosphere that the surface would have been in almost complete darkness for more than a century. It would have been seemingly endless night. That's why there's so much snow down there. It's been winter down there ever since. The atmosphere has only recently cleared up enough for the snow to melt. Fimbulwinter, thought Merrick. The endless winter of Norse mythology that heralded Ragnarok, the end of the world. That would explain the death of the ocean, he thought. No light would mean no photosynthesis. No photosynthesis, no plankton. No plankton, no oxygen, and then everything else would have died. There are still too many unanswered questions, he said. I'll be lifting off shortly. See you soon. Great, but be careful. I'm tracking a lot of clutter in orbit. Keep this channel open so I can warn you of anything coming your way. As his one-man shuttle climbed higher in the sky slowly changed color from dusty brown to bright blue, which faded into the endless night of space. It happened while we were gone, he thought. We were in transit when it all went down and never knew. How ironic, he thought. When the secret to teleportation was discovered, we all thought that it would revolutionize the world. It gave us the stars, but teleportation had its own quirks. Teleportation worked well for traveling to distant stars, but it proved to be impractical for travel within the solar system. Technological discoveries had allowed engineers to convert matter into a quantum field. Anything within that region of space was transformed into something that was neither energy nor matter. It was simply a probability field. That unstable field, or probabilistic potential, could be aimed in any direction, and the waveform would then propagate at the speed of light until specific boundary value conditions were met. Then it would materialize back into matter. The result was teleportation, the instant translation from one location to another. No time passed for the matter that was moved this way. But they say that the devil is in the details. And the problem with this marvelous solution was that the distance was determined by the mass of the object. The greater the mass, the greater the distance that the objects were teleported. If you teleported a pea that weighed 1 gram, it would materialize 3 million miles away, about 15 times the distance to the moon. An object that weighed 3 ounces would reach Mars. A 1-pound package would travel as far as Neptune. The distance was always the same and was determined by mass. It couldn't be changed. We couldn't use it to travel around Earth or even reach other planets, but we could use it to travel to the stars. The reality was that it was simple to build a small ship weighing 8 tons that would disappear and then simply reappear at the nearest star 4 light years away. The best thing was that no time at all passed for the passengers or pilots. However, 4 years would have passed in the real world. After all, the quantum waveform propagated at the speed of light. Therefore, a round trip to the nearest star might only take minutes for the pilot of the ship, but 8 years would have passed on Earth while he was gone. The stars were within reach. All it took was energy, which was cheap and easily generated by small, efficient fusion reactors. Trips to the other stars became increasingly frequent. Soon, dozens of ships had left on trips, much further than anyone had seriously believed possible. Thus, a small cadre of interstellar pilots was created. Interstellar pilots were special people who traveled back and forth between the stars, but there was a price they had to pay. If a pilot visited a star 20 light years away, time would pass while they were in transit. Only a few days might pass for them. Those pilots would return to their place of origin 40 years after they left. Pilots were thus displaced to some degree from other people on Earth. They traveled not only great distances, they effectively traveled in time to distant futures. To normal people on Earth, pilots were virtual immortals who outlived everyone else. As they traveled, they would vanish and reappear many years later with stories of new worlds to visit or colonize. Sometimes they'd carry passengers to new colonies, but for most people, such trips were one-way experiences. Only pilots made round trips. And with each trip, they became more displaced in time, never really reconnecting to Earth, which grew and changed in the years they were gone. Pilots became legendary figures, celebrities of history, who had seen the world as it had been many years ago and who would visit distant futures that no one else would ever live to see. They were mysterious heroes who never aged over many decades or centuries that they traveled. Merrick and Joan were royalty amongst those few. They had traveled further in both time and space than any of the other pilots. They had started flying more than 800 years before. Each time they returned, upgraded their ships, and vanished again into interstellar space to visit a different distant star. This last trip, they had visited a star called Deneb. It was 104 light years away, the 20th brightest star in the sky. They'd only spent 9 months on site after their arrival, and they only stayed long enough to survey the star system and the planets they found there. On this trip, they had found 2 worlds that were candidates for colonization. However, 208 years had passed on Earth since they had left. This had been their longest trip so far. After Merrick returned to the main ship and docked his small lander, he and Joan discussed their findings about the world below. Unwilling to accept the complete death of mankind, they decided to look for other possible survivors. Merrick suggested that they broadcast a message on multiple channels to find out if they could contact anyone that might remain alive in the solar system. Joan sent out the message, and together they hoped they might contact people who had sheltered in space or took refuge in space habitats elsewhere. Maybe there's an outpost, base, or colony somewhere that we can reach, thought Merrick. We'll have to wait some time for a reply. Even if anyone's listening, it'll take a couple of days for the signal to cross the solar system. As they waited, Joan continued to monitor nearby space for hazards in orbit near them. Periodically, she would warn about objects passing nearby. For her, nearby meant anything sizable less than a dozen miles away. Over the next day, nothing passed close enough to be any cause of concern, but she remained diligent while listening and hoping for a reply to her message. Finally, she said, there are too many possible collisions to keep track of. I'm going to launch some of the probes we left from our survey of the Deneb system. I'll park them a few miles away and arm them with proximity sensors and high explosive charges. If anything gets too close, they'll attach to the rocks and explode. Merrick laughed. So you're going to deploy space mines? Smiling, she replied, yeah, well, sort of. But they should deflect any incoming rocks that come too close. Don't worry. We probably won't need to use any of them, and we can retrieve them before we leave. Shortly thereafter, Merrick had an idea. Hey, try listening to the emergency channel. The one that we're supposed to use if we returned and had engine problems, and that they'd call us for pickup. Someone might have left a message there for returning pilots. Joan opened the channel to listen, and after a few minutes she said, that's odd. I'm getting a steady carrier signal, but I'm only getting a burst of static every few seconds. Can you analyze the static? Suggested Merrick. That's unusual. It looks like an old-fashioned internet packet. It's empty, or rather, it's almost empty. It only contains 8 bytes of information that repeat over and over again. What is the info? They're numbers. They're 225, 32, 100, 111, 103, 32, and 150. But what's that supposed to mean? Is it encrypted? Asked Merrick. No. The data section is plain text. Then it must be a code, he said. Have the AI analyze it to see if you can make any sense of it. Might be part of a larger message. Then, while they were waiting for the AI to work on the problem, a ship unexpectedly appeared right in front of them. Joan screamed and pointed at it. Merrick blinked in surprise. It was of a design the likes of which he'd never seen. It was 3 or 4 times their size, and so close to true black that it was difficult to see against the star field beyond. It bristled with so many sensors and weapon mounts with unfamiliar armament that it looked like a many-legged insect. Joan hailed it, but there was no reply. Merrick, she said ominously, it just scanned us with radar and lidar, and before she could complete her sentence, it abruptly vanished. What the hell was that? Asked Merrick. I have no idea. Any idea where it came from? No, but maybe technology advanced a lot while we were gone. I didn't recognize that style of ship at all, said Merrick. Me neither. Again, without any hint or warning, the ship reappeared, this time closer than before, a mere 50 meters away. Joan started to hail it again, since it seemed friendly, at least until it fired an energy beam of some kind that passed completely through their ship. Then it vanished again. Alarms immediately sounded, alerting them to breaches in the hull. Cabin pressure started to drop as their air began to vent out into space. The next few minutes would be best described as disciplined panic, as they hurriedly patched the holes in their ship's hull. After sealing the leaks, they checked on any other damage the beam had caused. They were lucky. The only other damage had been to a secondary hydraulic system, which was easily fixed, and for which they had replacement parts. "What happened?" asked Merrick. "I haven't a clue," sighed Joan. "It hit us with some sort of weapon. It wasn't a laser. It was far too powerful. It might have been a plasma beam of some sort." Before they could discuss it further, the black ship returned once more, appearing in front of them a few hundred yards away. "What's it doing?" asked Merrick. "Nothing. It's just sitting there." "Shoot it," he said. "Why?" "It shot us. Let's return the favor." Joan launched a missile armed with high explosive. It was minimum range, so it was an easy target. However, as the missile shot from the ship, the enemy ship vanished, and the projectile couldn't find a target to lock on. The missile finally found a rock about the size of the ship, more than 20 miles away. Then the ship reappeared and destroyed the missile launch tube with another precision shot from its powerful beam weapon. Joan fired another missile from their other launcher, but the ship miraculously moved to the other side of the ship and took out that missile tube as well. Merrick then swiveled the laser on top of the ship to aim at the vessel, but again a single shot from the mysterious ship destroyed their last weapon. Then it stopped moving once more. "Who are those guys?" asked John. "I don't know, but the colony on Titan was working on new military ships when we left. Maybe this is left over from there." "What's it doing?" "I think it's playing cat and mouse. That first shot proved they could easily destroy us, but they haven't. They've merely reacted to all of our actions. Whoever they are, they're showing us that with their weapons and their ability to vanish and reappear, we can't harm them." "Should we try to run?" asked Joan. "I doubt we'd get very far, but let's see if they'll even let us move." Merrick fired up the ion drive. Since it only produced a quarter G of acceleration, they might not outdistance them very fast, but since it provided continual thrust, they could reach speeds of over 25,000 miles per second and traverse the entire solar system in days. Unfortunately, no sooner had Merrick started the engine than the enemy craft popped behind them and disabled the ion drive with a single shot. "Now we're adrift," muttered Merrick. "Damn, I should have realized they'd do that." "So what now?" asked Joan. "We can't fight or even flee. What do you think they're doing?" "I'd wager they're gloating," muttered Merrick. "Maybe they want to board us or capture us alive." "Well," said Joan, "they don't seem to be in a hurry. They take their time." "Wait, I know what they're waiting for. They want to see if we contact any other survivors. They're using us as bait." "So what should we do?" "We can't do anything," said Merrick. "Actually, we're defenseless." Joan gasped and said, "Actually, that's not true. Not completely." Then she started entering instructions on her console. "What are you doing?" he asked. "You'll see," she replied. After a few minutes, she instructed Merrick to use the ship's maneuvering thrusters to slowly turn the ship 90 degrees to port. When he did, The strange vessel just popped in front of their ship to block their path. "Got you, you bastard," shouted Joan as she slammed her hand down on a button on the console. Then Merrick watched in stunned silence as dozens of small objects rushed to the other ship. Before the other ship could move, however, a series of explosions flashed across its surface, each ripping a large hole in their hull. Then there was a large secondary explosion that shoved them violently away. It took Merrick and Joan almost 2 minutes to stop the tumbling of their ship and regain control using their small maneuvering thrusters. Finally, Merrick turned his attention back to the other ship, but there was nothing left except a slowly expanding field of debris. "What happened?" he asked. "You said we were defenseless," answered Joan, "but you forgot those probes I launched earlier, the ones with the proximity sensors." "Yeah, I called them space mines." "Well, I recalled them all, pulling them back slowly so they'd look like drifting debris. Then, when I'd gathered them close enough, I had you turn the shuttle. When the other shuttle moved the way I thought it might, I ordered the cluster of probes to rush the ship. Before it could jump away, they attached themselves and detonated." "Wow," said Merrick in awe. "It must have been like getting hit with 50 missiles all at once." "They didn't expect anything," gloated Joan triumphantly. "Just goes to show, superior tactics trump superior weapons. We destroyed them all." "No," said Merrick. "You did. You destroyed them. I guess I should say thanks." "You're welcome," she said proudly. "Anyway, who do you think they were, and where did they come from?" "I don't know, but I'm pretty sure they're extrasolar in origin." "Do you mean—" "Yeah, I don't think they're of human origin." "You may be right. They just appeared. I bet they responded to that broadcast we sent out earlier. It almost seemed like they teleported when they moved." "But that's impossible," said Merrick. "A ship that size would have traveled hundreds of light years before the boundary value conditions allowed the waveform to collapse and rematerialize." "Unless they've learned to change or alter those boundary value conditions," suggested Joan. Neither spoke for a while. The implications were staggering. "Let's get closer," he said. "Use the ship's AI to scan the debris." After a few minutes, Joan announced, "I found a few pieces of the hull with markings on them. The computer says they don't correspond to any known human script." "Keep searching," he instructed. "What are we looking for?" "You'll know it when you see it," he replied. Finally, they noticed something strange floating amongst the debris, something very different. It was a body, badly burned and damaged, but definitely something that had once been living. Whatever it was hadn't handled rapid decompression very well. It was covered in a black outfit of some kind, so it had been hard to find. It was too large to be human, and it had too many limbs that bent in too many directions. "My God," gasped Joan. "They are aliens. They're not from Earth." "Yeah," said Merrick. "Aliens who had better weapons technology and who know how to teleport much better than we do." "But how? And why would they appear now?" Merrick thought for a few minutes and then said, "If they're aliens, I'll bet that one of the other pilot crews traveling to another star stumbled on them or one of their worlds. The aliens probably noticed them and followed them back to Earth." Joan replied, "That means that the destruction of Earth wasn't just an unfortunate accident. It might be that the aliens arranged those meteors to impact the planet. They may have pushed the asteroids to be on a collision course." "Or even a small moon," suggested Merrick. "Oh, I just thought of something. What if they somehow teleported the asteroids on trajectories to collide with Earth? If they did that, it would explain why the people didn't have time to deflect the incoming meteors." "Well, it looks like our people tried, but they only succeeded in creating More incoming rocks. God, so much destruction. Merrick, that might also explain why we can't find anyone. Everyone left. After wrecking the Earth, the aliens probably picked off the remaining survivors. Any survivors in orbiting habitats or any of the colonies were systematically killed. The only way people could survive would be to teleport away, and anyone left behind would have been sitting ducks. But why would they do this? Why would they have gone out of their way to attack us? Wait, it probably wasn't for resources or colonization, since there's no aliens down there and the destruction was too complete. I'll bet they were just eliminating any potential competition. Maybe their species suffers from extreme racial xenophobia. Wait, if this happened so long ago and they didn't want the planet, then why are they still here in the system? Asked Joan. Thought Merrick. Maybe they left a sentry ship behind to catch any returning pilots like us. Does that mean they started a war and humanity lost? Yes, but the war may not be over. If enough people were able to teleport away, humanity might still exist and the war could still be going on. Well, then we can't stay here. More of them could arrive. We have to leave, but where should we go? Well, there were a number of thriving colonies at other stars when we left. The question is which one we should try to go to. There were more than a dozen out there when we left. Wait. We were in the process of deciphering a message that someone left for us. Check the AI, see if it's figured out anything. Joan checked and replied, "The computer says the numbers are ASCII characters, some kind of archaic code from the early digital age." What characters? The characters are a Greek alpha, the word dog, and a dash sign, but that doesn't make any sense. Merrick thought for a moment and blurted, "Wait, yes it does. I was thinking it had to be the name of a place. Then I realized the Latin word for dog is canis, and that's not a dash, it's a minus sign. It could mean Alpha Canis Minoris." "I still don't get it," said Joan. "What does that mean?" "It's the brightest star in the Little Dipper. It's an archaic name for the star Procyon." "That's where Earth's biggest colony was, right?" asked Joan. "Do you think the survivors fled there?" "It's a real possibility," said Merrick. "Someone left us a clue, and they left us a message on a channel that only returning pilots would listen to. If everyone left, the only people to worry about would be returning pilots like us who were in transit when the aliens arrived. In any case, there's no way to find out if we're right unless we go." "Okay," she said. "Let's see. Procyon is 25.4 light years away, but that doesn't help. If we teleport with our current mass, we'll travel 104 light years and overshoot Procyon. We'll be further away from there than we are now." "No," said Merrick. "If we dump all our ballast and strip the ship to minimum weight, we can shorten our jump distance to just under 50 light years." "Well, that's not helpful. We'd still overshoot by 25 years. "No, we can do it. Here, I can show you." Then he typed some calculations into the computer and generated a picture of a triangle with two long sides and one short side. "You see, all we have to do is teleport to a point that's exactly 50 light years from us and also 50 light years from Procyon. See," he said, pointing at his diagram, "if we jump 50 light years off at an angle of 70 degrees, then we'd be at a point that's exactly 50 light years from Procyon. Then we could jump directly to Procyon from there. We'd just get there in two jumps of 50 light years instead of one jump of 25. We could leave as soon as I repair the ion drive, and we could do both jumps in minutes by our time." "Yeah, but it'll take us 100 years to travel 25 light years," said Joan. Hey, it's the best we can do unless you can figure out how to shorten the distance like the aliens do. Tell you what, you double-check my calculations and plot a course while I go check on the damage to the ion drive. Merrick suited up and exited the airlock with a repair kit and a satchel of spare parts. A half hour later, he returned, announcing that the alien ship had punched a hole in the exhaust port, but it was easily patched. "You're right," said Joan. "Even if we overshoot our target, we can reach Procyon in 2 jumps. I just worry that it'll cost us more than 100 years to go 25 light years." "Ah, but time doesn't matter to us," countered Merrick. "We left all our family and friends behind many centuries ago. Anyway, we have to try. We can't stay here. More alien ships may show up. If anyone survived the war, we can join them, and if we're lucky, by the time we find them, maybe mankind will have learned that trick on how to make shorter jumps. Technology may have advanced a lot by then. Also, on the plus side, the war with the aliens could be over by then. People there could tell us what really happened. By then, if we don't find any survivors, we can keep jumping to the other colonies and keep searching. With 50 years passing with each jump, millennia could pass for us, but only a few days would go by. Besides, what other option do we have?" "You're right, I guess. At least it's a plan." "Tell you what," he said. "Don't think of us as interstellar travelers. Think of us as time travelers, off to a distant future. After all, 1,000 years of real time could pass before we find out where everyone went." "Oh, I never looked at it like that." "Well, then we'd best get started. Go ahead and power up the jump drive, and let's go see what tomorrow looks like." Joan activated the engines, and their ship disappeared into an uncertain future. Thank you for listening. As you know by now, we love our listeners, fans, patrons, and supporters. Please let us know what you think of our podcast and our stories. The best way to do that is to subscribe to our podcast at untold-tales.com. By doing so, you'll be added to our mailing list so you can be notified of upcoming episodes, blogs, and other information. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.